Story 1. When I arrived at my new country house, a mix of relief and anxiety washed over me. The vastness of the tall trees surrounded the house, creating an atmosphere of isolation that made me feel both at peace and uneasy. The silence was deep, almost tangible, and as I unloaded the boxes from the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. "It's just the beginning," I murmured to myself, trying to convincingly believe that this change would be a new chapter in my life, far from the turbulent memories of my divorce. As I organized the kitchen, the wooden walls creaked softly, as if the house were adjusting to my presence. Looking out the window, I saw a vast expansive field where the sun was setting in a spectacle of warm colors. This is what I needed, I thought, but a faint shadow of discomfort still accompanied me, like a dark cloud hovering on the horizon. Night fell quickly, and as I settled down with a book in hand, something made me look out the window. A shadow moved outside, but when I blinked, it disappeared. Probably just my imagination, I took a deep breath, trying to ignore the unease that was beginning to blossom within me. However, the feeling of being watched did not leave me. The shadow seemed to have a life of its own, and even without seeing it clearly, I felt that it was there, watching me. In the following days, routine settled in, but each night brought the same unsettling visitor. As darkness fell, the shadow appeared again, closer to the window, as if it wanted to introduce itself. "It's just a trick of the light," I repeated to myself, but the sensation of being watched became increasingly oppressive. The silence of the house, which had once comforted me, now turned into fertile ground for my paranoia. "You're going crazy, Sarah," I whispered, trying to convince myself that it was just the stress of a new life. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right, and the shadow continued to draw closer, like a promise that the truth was about to be revealed. The sunlight filtered through the trees, creating dancing patterns on the ground as I walked through the forest surrounding my new home. The cool breeze wrapped around me, but strangely, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I decided that exploring the area might be the distraction I needed to push away the dark thoughts haunting me. After a few minutes of walking, I spotted a small abandoned cabin, hidden among the leaves. My feet hesitated, but curiosity pulled me toward the deteriorating structure. The door creaked as I pushed it open, revealing a dusty interior filled with cobwebs. In the corner, a weathered diary caught my attention. With trembling hands, I picked it up and, upon opening it, realized it belonged to a woman named Emily. "Emily, what happened to you?" I murmured to myself as the pages unfolded, revealing intimate and anguished accounts. Each entry spoke of a shadow that followed her, a presence that made her feel as if she were being watched. A chill ran down my spine. It can't be just a coincidence, I thought, as paranoia began to settle in my heart. With each line I read, the connection to Emily grew more intense. "Why didn't you leave? What happened when the shadow got so close?" I questioned aloud, as if I could get answers from that silent diary. Each account seemed to echo my own experience, and I wondered if the shadow that watched Emily was also watching me. That night, as I tried to sleep, the darkness felt more oppressive than ever. The shadow was closer to the window, and I, terrified, wondered if I was losing my sanity. "No, this can't be happening to me," I said, trying to convince myself. But the feeling of being watched wouldn't let me be at peace. The shadow had become a constant presence, and with each passing night, my fear grew. "I need to understand what's going on," I murmured to myself, determined to face the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. When I looked out the window, the darkness seemed to stir, as if the shadow was drawing closer once again. I closed the curtains, but the sensation persisted, as if the very darkness were alive, breathing, waiting. The house was engulfed in an oppressive silence when David arrived. The sun had already set, and the darkness seemed to seep into every corner. I greeted him with a nervous smile, trying to hide the tension that had built up in my chest. "Hey, Sarah. How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice gentle and reassuring, but I could see the concern in his eyes. "I don't know, David. The nights have been different," I replied, trying to find the words that could convey the terror haunting me. He settled onto the sofa and looked at me, attentive. "Do you want to tell me what's going on?" I took a deep breath and began to describe the shadows, the feeling of being watched. It appears every night, closer to the window each time. I know it might sound crazy, but I feel like it's watching me, as if it wants something from me. David frowned. Sarah, you went through a tough divorce. It's normal to be stressed. Maybe you're just projecting your fears. But it's not just that. I exclaimed, my voice almost breaking. I feel like I'm not alone. There's something here. He tried to calm me, but the expression on his face showed that he was becoming increasingly worried. Look, I'm going to stay here tonight. We'll face this together. I thanked him, but the feeling of dread didn't dissipate. As night fell, the silence became almost deafening. David and I tried to watch television, but the sound from the screen was muffled by my own racing heart. Later, when I was already lying down, I heard David moving around. He got up, and I saw him through the slightly open door, heading toward the window. Sarah, are you awake? He whispered. I am, I replied, fear coursing through me like a chilling cold. Be careful, David. I was on high alert, unable to take my eyes off the window. What I feared was out there, closer than ever. Is there something out there? I said, almost in a whisper, unable to look away. He approached the window, and suddenly, whispers began to echo through the room. The atmosphere became dense, and I knew something was about to happen. Sarah, what do you see? He asked, his voice tense. Look! I pointed, my body trembling. The shadow was visible now, an indistinct form, but clearly threatening. David hesitated, but then moved closer to the window. When he turned to face me, the shadow vanished as if it had never been there. There's nothing here, he said, trying to stay calm, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. You don't understand. It was here. I'm not crazy. I shouted, tears welling up in my eyes. He stepped closer, but I didn't want him to move away. Sarah, maybe you should think about leaving this house. It's not good for you. No, I said, determination taking over. I can't run away. I need to find out what's going on. Anxiety almost consumed me as I set up the security cameras around the house. Each click seemed to echo in my chest, and I wondered if I was really doing what I needed to do. This will end this madness, I murmured to myself, trying to convince myself. The idea of having proof of what was happening gave me a glimmer of hope, but the weight of doubt still lingered over me. As I walked through the dark corridors, I felt the presence of the shadow like a heavy cloud over my head. That night, I sat in front of the computer, the camera recordings flickering on the screen. My eyes fixated on the images, and my heart raced as I saw the shadow moving toward the window. David, come here. Look at this. I shouted, but when he approached, the recording inexplicably glitched, and the screen went dark. Frustration and fear mingled within me. Sarah, maybe you're just letting the pressure get to you, David said, his expression one of concern. We need to talk about this. You don't understand, David. It's real. I saw it. My voice trembled, and I wondered if he still believed me. He took a deep breath, as if trying to find the right words. I'm worried about you. This is affecting you in a way that isn't healthy. His gaze was serious, but I couldn't let this go. Not now. Night fell, and as I prepared for bed, a knock echoed at the door. My heart stopped. I got up cautiously, adrenaline pulsing through my veins. I opened the door with a knot in my throat, but there was no one there. A deep emptiness took hold of me, and as I turned back inside, the shadow was there, bolder than ever, almost projecting against the moonlight streaming through the window. The feeling of despair and helplessness overwhelmed me, and before I could move, everything went dark. I fainted. The last thought that crossed my mind was the sensation that the shadow had finally caught up with me. When I regained consciousness, I was lying on the couch, the sheets crumpled around me. David was by my side, his expression worried. Sarah, are you okay? What happened? He was holding my hand, and the concern in his eyes was palpable. But I wasn't sure how to respond. The line between reality and nightmare was becoming increasingly thin, and I knew that something terrible was about to happen. I woke up on the sofa, the morning light filtering through the curtains, bringing a temporary relief, but confusion still reigned in my mind. I got up with difficulty, trying to recall the last moments before I fainted. The sense of disorientation was intense, as if I were trapped between two worlds. David was by my side. His expression of concern made me feel a mix of comfort and despair. "Sarah, you scared me," he said, his voice trembling. "We need to get out of here. This house isn't safe." "No, David." My voice came out firmer than I expected. "I need to find out the truth about the shadow. I can't just run away." He shook his head, frustrated. "You're putting yourself in danger. If only you could see what I see. I know what I'm seeing." I interrupted, feeling anger and fear boiling inside me. "It's a shadow, something that's watching me. I can't ignore it." After a brief silence, David sighed, but he didn't insist anymore. His gaze made me feel that he truly cared, but there was a part of me that was determined to confront this manifestation of my fear. With renewed determination, I grabbed a flashlight and decided to explore the abandoned cabin. The forest surrounding the house had always intrigued me, and now it felt like an irresistible call. With each step I took, anxiety mixed with curiosity. Upon reaching the cabin, the door creaked ominously as I pushed it open. Inside, the air was heavy and saturated with the smell of mold. The light from the flashlight danced on the walls, revealing dusty objects that seemed to tell untold stories. I found a diary, like Emily's, and several yellowed photographs, but one in particular made my heart race. It was a woman, and the resemblance between us was uncanny. As I examined the photo, a soft and familiar voice whispered my name, sending chills down my spine. "Sarah." The sound seemed to come from all directions, echoing in my mind. I turned slowly, and there she was, the shadow, more defined than ever, watching me from the dark corner of the room. Fear mingled with fascination. It was as if the shadow was waiting, as if it knew I had come close to the truth. What did it want from me? And, more importantly, what was I willing to do to find out? The atmosphere in the abandoned cabin was heavy, as if every object had a secret to whisper. I was frozen, the photo of the woman who looked so much like me in my hands. The familiar whisper echoed in my ears, calling my name. "Sarah." It was a distant echo, yet so close at the same time. In the corner of the room, the shadow thickened, taking shape. My instincts screamed for me to run, but something kept me there, fixed, watching the figure emerge from the darkness. "You finally found me," the woman said, her voice soft like a lament. "I am Emily." "Emily?" I could barely pronounce the name as the shadow molded into a feminine figure, her empty eyes reflecting a deep sorrow. "What do you want from me?" "I am trapped between worlds, Sarah. My soul has not found peace," she replied, her expression revealing a despair that seemed to cut through my heart. "I need your help to be free." "How can I help you?" The question slipped out before I could think. Fear and curiosity intertwined within me as the idea of helping that shadowy figure became more and more real. "The only way for me to be free is to exchange my life force," Emily explained, her voice now almost a whisper. "You must offer something in return." I looked at David, who stood at the entrance of the cabin, his gaze fixed on us. "David. He is the key, isn't he?" The reality began to form in my mind, like a puzzle finally put together. The connection between us left me nauseous. I knew it was a sacrifice, but the need to understand, to free Emily, was stronger. "If you don't sacrifice him, I will be stuck here forever," Emily said, her voice now a plea. The desperation in her gaze made me hesitate, but an idea solidified in my heart. With a determined movement, I approached the shadow, extending my hand. "If this is what you need, then I will do it." But upon touching the shadow, a wave of pain coursed through my body. What I had hoped would be liberation turned into a whirlwind of emotions, revealing that shadow, that woman, was merely an extension of myself. I wasn't helping Emily, I was confronting my own fears, traumas that I couldn't face. The truth hit me hard. I was the shadow, trapped by the pain and fear I had accumulated over the years. "Sarah, no!" David shouted, his horror evident as the transformation unfolded before his eyes. The darkness I feared became part of me, and tears streamed down my face as reality grew increasingly distorted. I was not the heroine of the story, I was the villain. A part of me twisted, struggling against the new reality, while the other resigned to the fact that, for too long, I had been the shadow itself. Story 2. The warehouse exit signal resonated like a relief and a farewell at the same time. I stretched my arms, trying to shake off the fatigue accumulated from the long hours of work. The sky, once blue, was now tinged with a deep and threatening hue, as if it wanted to engulf the entire city. As I crossed the door, a chill ran down my spine. "Jake, are you really going to take that road at night?" asked Tom, one of the more experienced colleagues, with a look of concern about to turn into admonition. "Oh, come on, Tom. Those stories about lost souls are just legends. A bunch of nonsense." "I'll get home quickly," I replied, trying to divert his anxious gaze. The others, instead of reassuring me, just shook their heads, as if they were aware of something I had yet to perceive. I just laughed, waving and walking away. As I walked along the rural road, childhood memories began to dance in my mind. The stories I heard sitting on my grandfather's lap, the whispers about souls wandering that road, lost between the world of the living and the dead. This is just a fable for children, I thought, looking at the shadows of the trees stretching as daylight faded. Laughter escaped my lips, a reflection of my disbelief. "Jake, you're a grown man. This isn't a fairy tale," I murmured to myself. However, the calmness of the road seemed unreal. The birds' singing ceased, and a profound silence took over the environment. That's when a faint sound of footsteps behind me began to stand out. It was a noise almost imperceptible, but it made my heart race. I looked back, but saw nothing. Only the deserted road stretched behind me, like a vast endless desert. The cold in my spine intensified, and the feeling that I was not alone began to consume me. "It's just the wind," I tried to convince myself, but the restlessness started to envelop me like a dense fog. I walked quickly, feeling the tension rise with each step. The sounds of my sneakers on the asphalt were muffled by the distant echo of footsteps that seemed to follow me. "It's just my imagination," I thought, trying to reassure myself, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. The music in my earbuds made a Herculean effort to distract me, but the beats of an upbeat song couldn't drown out the footsteps that became increasingly audible. Desperate, I decided to stop for a moment. The silence of the road was almost palpable, an emptiness that surrounded me. I looked back. A dark shadow moved quickly between the trees. My heart raced, and a chill ran down my spine. "Who's there?" I shouted, but only silence replied. The shadow disappeared, but the feeling of being watched persisted. I looked back to the front and, without thinking twice, I started walking again, trying to convince myself that it was just an illusion. But the curve of the road was approaching, and with it, the footsteps intensified. They were now quick and frantic, as if something was running after me. A wave of panic swept over me, and in a moment of desperation, I began to run. "This can't be happening," I thought, as my breathing became increasingly irregular. The adrenaline pulsed through my veins, and the road stretched out before me, a dark serpent under the light of the moon. "Please, no!" I whispered to myself as the shadows seemed to dance around me. "I don't believe in you. Leave me alone." And even as I spoke, a part of me knew that those words were in vain. The stories I had always ridiculed were now coming to life. The sound of footsteps drew closer, and I didn't know how far my courage would take me. Fear transformed into a force that propelled me forward, and I ran as if my life depended on it, each step echoing the urgency to escape something I couldn't comprehend. The adrenaline surged through my veins as I ran wildly down the road, the shadows appearing to dance around me, as if they were having fun at my expense. The wind whipped against my face, and every beat of my heart echoed in my ears. "No, no, no!" I whispered to myself, the tales of the vengeful spirit echoing in my mind. This isn't real. It's just my imagination. But reality was fading away. I could no longer distinguish what was real and what was merely a product of my fear. With each step, the shadows seemed to draw closer, as if they were playing a game of hide and seek, and I was the only one who didn't know the rules. In a desperate impulse, I reached a clearing and hid behind a tree, trying to control my gasping breath. As I hid, a soft whisper drifted through the air, so ethereal it seemed to come from all directions. Regret, revenge, the voices murmured, as if they were discussing me, about my disbelief. I tried to stifle the fear that was growing inside me. This can't be real, I kept repeating, but the truth was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. The weight of history, of lost souls, seemed to cluster around me. After a few moments that felt like an eternity, the feeling of safety began to envelop me slowly. I needed to go back and seek help. Maybe someone can help me understand what's happening, I thought, as I tried to get up. But as I did, a figure in the distance caught my attention. It stood still, watching me with a piercing gaze that froze my blood. "Who are you?" I shouted, but the figure remained silent. When I blinked, it vanished, as if it had never been there. Uncertainty engulfed me. Was this yet another of the illusions created by my panicked mind? "I need to get out of here," I murmured to myself, the urgency pushing me forward. But the road ahead seemed as dark and threatening as before, filled with mysteries I was not prepared to face. Continuing the walk towards the city seemed the only viable option, but with every step I took, the feeling of being watched intensified, as if 1,000 invisible eyes were fixed on me. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but the anxiety throbbed in my chest, and the silence around me was oppressive. Every snap of a twig and rustle of leaves felt like a dark summons, a reminder of everything I was trying to ignore. When I passed by an old landmark on the road, something paralyzed me. A vision appeared before me, a man with a vacant stare, as if he had stepped out of a nightmare. His expression was one of pain, and his lifeless eyes seemed to pierce my soul. I wondered if it was an illusion, but the feeling of reality was palpable. "You shouldn't be here," his voice whispered, low and dragged out, as if each word was laden with immense weight. The sound echoed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was speaking about something more than just the road. He began to approach, and an inexplicable force drew me toward him. I tried to step back, but my legs felt glued to the ground, as if the very earth was imprisoning me. I need to go," I tried to say, but my voice failed me. My memories swirled in a turmoil of images, lost souls pleading for help, shadows dancing around me, and I, paralyzed, unable to react. "Help us," the voices pleaded, and the pain I saw on the man's face intensified the feeling of despair within me. "You are one of them, Jake," he whispered again, and the revelation hit me like a blow. I was not just a spectator, I was somehow connected to all of this. "Free us," he asked, extending his hand, but the connection between us was suffocating. The only thing I could feel was the weight of guilt, of the disbelief I had carried for so long. "I can't. I don't know how," I managed to murmur, fear evident in my voice. But as he moved closer, I couldn't look away from his tormented face. His despair became mine, and a part of me wanted to understand, wanted to help. The atmosphere around me seemed to shift, the whispers intensifying, and the line between reality and legend blurred even further. The silence of the abandoned cabin was almost deafening, broken only by the sound of my racing heart. I leaned against the door, trying to convince myself that this place could be a refuge. The moonlight filtered through the cracks, illuminating dusty objects that seemed to tell stories of the souls who had been there. Around me, there were torn clothes, faded photographs, and a musty smell that made my throat tighten. "Jake, you need to calm down," I murmured to myself, trying to shake off the feeling that something was about to happen. It was then that I spotted a small table in the corner of the room. On it lay a diary, its yellowed pages seeming to cry out for attention. With an impulse, I went over and opened the notebook. Clara's words leapt from the pages as if they wanted to embrace me. "I feel trapped between worlds," she wrote, her shaky handwriting revealing a deep anguish. The footsteps behind me never stop, and I don't know how to escape. With each sentence, my heart tightened more and more. She felt this too, I thought. She was haunted as well. The last pages of the diary spoke of a ritual. Clara had discovered a way to free the imprisoned souls, a spell that, according to her, could weaken the shackles that kept them in this world. If I can manage to do this, I whispered to myself, maybe I can help myself and them. But the idea of the ritual brought a new wave of panic. What if I failed? What if something horrible happened? As I analyzed the instructions, the echo of footsteps began to resonate around me again, louder and more insistent than before. I felt a chilling cold creep up my spine. No, not now, I murmured, adrenaline making my blood pulse in my veins. Time was running out, and I needed to act fast. What might have seemed like a simple legend was now revealing itself as a terrifying truth. Clara, help me, I pleaded, almost in a whisper, as I prepared to perform the ritual. The atmosphere in the cabin was changing. The pressure was rising, and I could feel that something was about to happen. The footsteps drew closer, and a voice whispered in my ear, almost inaudible but full of urgency, "Don't give up, Jake." I knew I had to be strong. Whatever was following me was not going to let me be at peace so easily. The atmosphere in the cabin was heavy, almost palpable. As I began the ritual, the words trembled on my lips. The ingredients I had gathered spread around me, each representing a part of the pain those souls carried. "Please, hear me," I murmured, closing my eyes and trying to focus. The air seemed to vibrate, and the dim light from the lantern cast dancing shadows on the walls. Suddenly, a familiar presence materialized before me. It was the man I had seen before, but now his expression was clearer, sadder. "Jake," he said, his deep voice echoing in the confined space. "I am one of those you saw. And you are the key." "I am the key? What do you mean?" I asked, the confusion mixing with the adrenaline pulsing through my veins. "What do you want from me? Your belief is what keeps all of us here. You need to understand the pain we carry. Only then can we be freed," he replied, his piercing eyes fixed on me. A chill ran down my spine. Guilt began to swell within me. "I never believed the stories," I said, my voice faltering. "I thought they were just legends to scare children. I didn't know there was truth in them. And that lack of belief is what has imprisoned us. You need to break free, Jake. Ask for forgiveness. Acknowledge the suffering that unites us." He seemed to be shedding his pain, but mine was a heavy burden. I took a deep breath, my mind filled with memories of every story I'd heard, every warning I'd ignored. "I'm sorry," I began, feeling the words build up in my throat. "I didn't know. I didn't mean to disrespect what you all went through. Please, I'm truly sorry." Then, a wave of warmth flooded the cabin. Bright lights began to float around me, dancing in harmony with my remorse. "That's it. Keep going," the figure said, and I realized he was dissolving into fragments of light. "I respect your stories. I understand now. You are not alone," I cried, my voice echoing. The light grew brighter, and the cabin began to shine as if it were alive. Then, a female figure appeared, radiant and full of peace. "I am Clara," she said, her voice soft like a summer breeze. "Finally, we have found our way." The man smiled at me one last time before dissipating, and I felt a wave of relief. Clara looked at me, and I saw immense gratitude in her eyes. "You brought redemption," she whispered. And the light emanating from the cabin expanded, enveloping everything around. When the light finally dissipated, the cabin was empty, but my heart felt light. I knew the souls were free, and somehow, I was too. With a new understanding, I left the cabin behind. The road that once terrified me was now a symbol of transformation. I walked home, the night illuminated by stars, aware that stories were not just tales, but echoes of lives lived. Story 3. The morning sun filtered through the windows of my new apartment, illuminating the worn walls of an old building in the heart of New York City. The atmosphere was a mix of excitement and a slight unease that I couldn't quite explain. I looked around, observing every corner. The wooden floor creaked under my feet, and the smell of fresh paint still lingered in the air. "It's perfect, Clara. You're going to love it here." Sarah, my best friend, was excited, helping me unpack boxes. She had always been the voice of reason, but today she could only see the bright side. "Look at this view. And the architecture. It's so charming." She gestured, pointing to the window where the city pulsed below. "Yeah, but it's different, isn't it?" I replied, hesitantly. The building had a history, and I could feel it. A light breeze swept through the room, making the curtains dance. "As if something is watching me." "You watch too many horror movies, Clara. It's just an old house. Come on, let's unpack." Sarah laughed, but there was a shadow of concern in her eyes. I knew she was always attentive to my mental health, especially after the move. And I, on the other hand, was trying to convince myself that everything was fine. Night fell quickly, and I found myself sitting at the dining table, surrounded by books and notes. The silence was almost oppressive. When the lights began to flicker, a sudden chill ran through my body. The air felt heavier, as if something was about to happen. That's when I heard it. "Clara." The soft voice whispered, almost like an echo. My heart raced. "Who's there?" I asked, trying to sound firm. But there was no response. The silence was deafening. It must just be my imagination, I thought, insisting on ignoring what I had heard. But the unease grew within me. The next morning, I decided to tell Sarah about the whisper. "You won't believe it, but last night I heard a voice calling me," I confessed, looking into her eyes. She frowned, concerned. "Clara, this could be the stress of the move. You need to relax. Let's do something fun today." I tried, but it felt so real. I looked down at the floor, remembering the chill that had rushed through me. Sarah took my hand, trying to comfort me. "I promise everything will be fine. Let's just distract ourselves. How about a coffee and a walk in Central Park?" I smiled, trying to absorb her positivity. "Okay, coffee." But that night, when the lights went out again, the whisper returned, so clear and insistent, "Clara." And no matter how much I tried to convince myself otherwise, I realized that something deeper was at play. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by books and papers, trying to unravel the mystery that seemed to consume me. My heart raced, and the fluorescent light flickered, as if it wanted to contribute to my anxiety. I grabbed my phone and started researching the history of the building. What I found left me in shock. Over the decades, several residents had disappeared without a trace. How was this not mentioned anywhere? I whispered to myself, as the words "mysterious disappearances" echoed in my mind. "Clara, are you okay?" Sarah's voice echoed from the other end of the line. I had called her without thinking much, and her concern was palpable. "Sarah, you won't believe what I found out about the building. It seems that several people have gone missing here." "What is happening?" "You need to stop worrying about this. It could just be an urban legend. What matters is that you're safe now," she replied, her voice heavy with concern. But the safety she mentioned felt like an illusion in light of what I had read. Night fell again, and alone in my apartment, the tension in the air grew. I decided to record my voice. If I can capture this, maybe I can understand, I thought, turning on my phone's camera. "Here I am again, waiting for you to show up," I murmured, looking at the shadows dancing on the walls. But the silence was deafening. I felt increasingly isolated, as if the world outside had vanished. The next day, I went to Dr. Thompson's office. He always had wise words, perhaps he could clarify what I was experiencing. "Clara, those whispers, have you considered that they might be reflections of something you haven't resolved?" he suggested, looking into my eyes with intensity. "But what if it's something more?" Something I can't control? I responded, feeling a wave of despair. He hesitated, as if weighing his words. Sometimes, the mind can be a treacherous place. You need to ask yourself, what do these whispers really mean to you? As I left the office, doubt tightened in my chest. What was I really facing? And, most importantly, how could I escape it? The voice returned to my mind, almost like a silent answer, but still, I wasn't sure if I was ready for what would come next. I woke up with a start, my heart racing and the sheet clinging to my body, soaked in sweat. The nightmare still echoed in my mind, the voice calling me, the distorted memories of a childhood I tried to forget. Clara. Clara, it whispered, as if it were dancing in the shadows of my past. I tried to remember the details, but everything was hazy, like a dense fog that refused to dissipate. I sat up in bed, my hands trembling, trying to muster the courage to face another night in that cursed apartment. I looked at the clock, it was 3 a.m. The silence in the place was deafening, but suddenly, I felt a chill cut through the air. The voice was heard again, this time clearer and more insistent. Clara, you can't run away from me. I got up, determined to confront what was tormenting me. The darkness felt alive, pulsating around me. Who are you? I asked, my voice trembling. Why are you haunting me? The response was a deafening scream that made the walls shake, and in the blink of an eye, all the lights went out, plunging the apartment into oppressive darkness. The noise of my thoughts was a whirlwind, and my breathing quickened. Desperate, I ran for the door, my heart pounding against my chest as if it wanted to escape. I knocked on my neighbor Mark's door, but there was no answer. The voice whispered again, now with a threatening tone, as if it were getting closer. Clara, you can't leave. You belong to me. In a panic, I remembered Sarah. I grabbed my phone and dialed, but my hand was shaking so much that I almost dropped the device. Clara? Are you okay? A voice sounded worried on the other side. Sarah, please come here. I need you. There's something chasing me. I'm on my way, just tell me where you are. Sarah's voice was like balm, but I knew I couldn't wait. The voice in the darkness was intensifying, and every passing second felt like an eternity. With a confused mind, I looked around, searching for an escape. Clara, you can't trust her, the voice whispered, almost with a tone of satisfaction. That malevolent presence was trying to manipulate me, and I no longer knew who to trust. I hesitated for a moment, but the urgency to escape overwhelmed me. I decided that leaving that place, even for a few hours, was the only viable option. Clara? Sarah's voice brought me back to reality. I'm almost there. With the last remnants of courage, I shouted, I'm here, Sarah. Help me. As I waited, the voice echoed in the darkness, and I knew that if I couldn't confront my fears, they would consume me entirely. I took a deep breath as I opened the door of my apartment. The creaking echo of the wood sounded like a warning, but I was determined. The cold night of New York seemed to wrap the building in a cloak of mystery, and I needed to uncover what was hidden. The thought of finding answers about the whispers propelled me forward, even though fear wanted to paralyze me. I headed to the attic, a dusty space that had always seemed to call to me. My heart raced as I climbed the stairs, and the dim light of the lamp flickered, almost as if it were hesitating to illuminate me. When I found the diary, wrapped in a layer of dust and cobwebs, I felt a chill run down my spine. Lillian, I thought, recalling the name I had read in the notes about the building. With trembling hands, I opened the diary. The handwriting was elegant, but the words were heavy with palpable sadness. The voices follow me, one passage said. They whisper secrets that I cannot bear. With each page I turned, the feeling that Lillian was a part of me grew stronger. I needed to know more. Clara. The whisper cut through the air, and I froze. Do you hear them too? Who is there? The voice seemed to come from all sides, and I was surrounded by a presence I couldn't see. You have to understand. What happened here was not just an accident. The voice, though soft, had a tone of urgency. I continued to read, and the words about a secret kept leaked from the page, making my heart race. But before I could process it, the voice grew clearer, almost like a scream. "You are not ready to know the truth. Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice choked with confusion. "What do you know about me? The truth about your family is intertwined with mine. And if you don't discover it, you will be trapped here, just like me." Fear paralyzed me. Lillian's words and the whispers intertwined in my mind, forming a tangled web that seemed to pull me into an abyss. I looked at the diary, at the secrets it held, and realized that I could not turn back. Lillian's story and mine were connected in a way I did not yet understand. "If you know the truth, then help me understand," I pleaded, but the only response was an oppressive silence that hung in the air. What I was about to discover could change everything. With my heart in my throat, I continued to read, determined to face whatever lurked in the shadows of my past. The tension in my chest pulsed like a deafening drum as I climbed the stairs toward Mark's apartment. Each step echoed in my mind, reminding me of the voice that wouldn't leave me alone. When I reached his door, I hesitated, my hand trembling as I touched the doorbell. The door opened slowly, revealing Mark, with an expression that mixed surprise and concern. "Clara? What are you doing here?" he asked, his tone calm, but there was something in his posture that put me on alert. "We need to talk, Mark." "About the voice. You know something, don't you?" My voice came out firmer than I expected, but anxiety consumed me from within. He sighed, closing the door behind him. I heard it too. But I don't know what it means. I only know that it's someone who suffered a lot here." Those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. "How do you know that? What happened here?" I insisted, feeling the urgency grow. "There was a woman. Lillian. I researched. She disappeared decades ago. People say her soul is still trapped in this place, searching for justice." A chill ran down my spine. The voice, it said it knows something about my family. The revelation made me feel as if I were about to faint. Mark watched me, his eyes wide. "You need to be careful, Clara. This voice could be trying to warn you or it could be something more malicious. I need to find Sarah," she said, determined to call my friend, but before I could grab my phone, the voice whispered, "She can't help you, Clara. It's too late." I felt a chill run through my body and the pressure in the air increased. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, adrenaline flooding my veins. The lights began to flicker, and a sense of despair enveloped me. The voice grew more aggressive, and before I could process it, an invisible force pushed me backward, making me fall heavily to the ground. Darkness swallowed me, and before I could scream for help, I lost consciousness. I woke up in a completely different place, the smell of mold and dust invading my nostrils. The darkness was dense, but the familiarity of the attic made me feel a pang of despair. Lillian's diary was there, beside me, as if it had been waiting for me. As I tried to get up, the voice echoed again, clearer than before. "Clara, you cannot escape what is destined for you. Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice trembling, not only from fear but from a growing determination. "Who are you really? I am what you ignore, what your lineage hides. You are a descendant of Lillian, and her pain runs in your veins." Her tone was icy, like a cutting wind. I looked around, surrounded by old objects and shadows that seemed to dance in the faint light of my phone, which was still flickering weakly. I remembered the passages I had read in the diary, about how Lillian fought against her own demons. "I am not Lillian. I am not you. But you are, Clara. You carry her weight. And until you break this cycle, you will be trapped here, just like she was." With my mind racing, I searched for a passage that spoke of forgiveness. The words danced in my mind, and with a thread of courage, I began to read them aloud. To forgive does not mean to forget, but to free oneself from pain and fear. The voice began to scream, a shrill sound that reverberated in the attic. "No! You can't do this!" The presence seemed to writhe, the shadows thrashing violently around me. "This cycle cannot be broken. But it can. I choose freedom, light. The words erupted from me like a primal scream. The attic started to glow, an intense light illuminating every dark corner that had once felt so oppressive. With one last roar, the voice dissolved into distant echoes, and the sensation of a colossal weight dissipated. The building now seemed to revive, the walls exhaling a relief I had never known existed. I stood up, feeling the vibrant energy around me, the air fresh and clean. I looked at the journal, now at peace, and left it there as a reminder that the past would not govern me anymore. As I left the attic, Mark was standing at the door, his expression a mix of guilt and fear. "Clara, I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't help." "You've been here all along, Mark," I replied, my voice firm. "And now, it's time for you to face what you helped perpetuate." He stepped back, eyes wide. "Please, I didn't want to. No more excuses. The truth must be revealed." And as the lights in the hallway flickered on, a new life unfolded before me, free from the chains that had bound me. Story 4. I woke up abruptly in the middle of the night, my heart racing and my breath coming in quick gasps. A strange feeling coursed through my body, as if 1,000 invisible eyes were watching me. The silence of the forest was oppressive, almost tangible. I got out of bed, hoping that the moonlight filtering through the curtains would bring me some comfort. I looked out the window, but the darkness seemed to swallow everything around. "It's just your imagination, John," I muttered to myself, trying to convince myself. The silence persisted, but an unsettling feeling settled in my chest. I returned to bed, but the sensation that something was wrong lingered. I closed my eyes, but the shadows danced in my mind, and sleep drifted further away. When I finally managed to fall asleep, my dreams were haunted by whispers that seemed to echo in the darkness. The next morning, the sunlight streamed through the window, bringing a new hope, but the feeling of discomfort had not vanished. I got up, and as I passed by the table, I noticed my wristwatch was out of place. I didn't leave it here, I thought, frowning. I looked around, trying to find a logical explanation. "Maybe I got distracted and forgot," I said aloud, as if that could dispel the doubt that was building in my mind. Determined not to let anxiety take over, I went out to the garden. As I walked, I felt the damp earth beneath my feet. It was then that I noticed the footprints in the soil, right next to the door. My heart raced, and the unease turned into a chill down my spine. "Those footprints are closer," I murmured, my voice trembling. "Nobody else should be here." The forest surrounding my cabin, once a refuge, now felt like a labyrinth of mysteries and threats. My thoughts spiraled, and the vulnerability inside the house became unbearable. I looked at the door, a fragile barrier between me and the unknown. "What's happening?" I asked myself in despair. And the forest, unperturbed, merely whispered its secrets. Night fell over the forest, and once again, restlessness settled in my chest. As darkness deepened, I felt something watching me. The silence was sharp, but in the distance, a whisper seemed to break the tranquility, as if the trees were sharing dark secrets. "It's just the wind," I murmured to myself, trying to shake off the feeling that I wasn't alone. But as the minutes dragged on, the voices did not cease. I locked all the doors and windows, feeling the need to protect myself from something I couldn't see. At dawn, I decided to investigate the kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee couldn't mask the strange feeling that lingered. Upon opening the cabinet, I noticed one of my pots was out of place. "This isn't normal," I said aloud, as if that would make everything more real. My eyes fixed on a small patch of dirt on the floor, as if something had been dragged there. Adrenaline coursed through my body. "What's going on here?" I asked the emptiness, but the only response was the echo of my own voice. In the days that followed, anxiety became a constant in my life. I decided I could no longer remain vulnerable, so I installed security cameras around the cabin. The idea of having some record of what happens around me gives me a false sense of control. If something happens, I will know, I tell myself as I place the last camera in its spot. Night approaches, and as I lie down, I feel time dragging. my heart beats faster as darkness becomes denser. The moonlight filters through the windows, but it's not enough to dispel the shadow that takes hold of me. With a restless mind, I close my eyes, but I can't escape the weight of terror that envelopes me. Tomorrow will be different, I promise, but deep down, I know the uncertainty that hangs over me won't dissipate so easily. The shadows dance around me, and the whisper that grows louder makes me feel as if I'm being pulled into an endless abyss. I'm not crazy, I say firmly, even though doubt begins to creep into my thoughts. Whatever is out there, I can no longer ignore it. Tomorrow, I will be the one to confront this presence. Sitting on my bed, the light from the camera's screen illuminated my face as I reviewed the recording from the previous night. My heart pounded fiercely in my chest, almost as if it wanted to escape the prison of bones and flesh. And then, I saw it, a dark shadow gliding toward the front door. I froze, my fingers trembling over the pause button. It can't be real, I murmured to myself, my voice sounding weak in the darkness. What was happening to me? Was I losing my sanity? I got up abruptly, feeling the adrenaline coursing through my body. The shadow in the recording seemed so real, so threatening. I needed a way to protect myself. I searched the small cabin, my eyes looking for anything that could give me a sense of security. Then, I remembered the old shotgun that belonged to my grandfather, stored in the living room cabinet. This is what I need, I thought as I rushed towards the cabinet. I rested the shotgun on my shoulder, the cold wood against my skin. I never thought I would reach the point of needing a weapon, but the idea of defending myself, of having something that could protect me, brought a slight sense of relief. If anyone is out there, I won't be a victim, I declared aloud, as if that could give me courage. The shotgun felt heavy, but at the same time, there was a power in it that made me a little more confident. That night, I stayed awake, my eyes glued to the camera screens. The clock struck 3 a.m. when a noise, like scratching, echoed from outside. My blood ran cold. What was that? I thought, my heart racing. I ran to the window, pulling the curtain aside with a swift motion. What I saw left me in shock, nothing. Just the darkness of a forest, thick and silent. It's my imagination, I tried to convince myself, but the unease remained, like a shadow that refused to disappear. With every creak of the wood or whisper of the wind, I remembered the shadow in the recording. I was not alone, and that left me restless. The night dragged on, and I knew that fear would not leave me anytime soon. If anyone is out there, I'll be ready, I murmured to myself, gripping the shotgun, my only hope amid the darkness that surrounded me. I woke up with the daylight filtering through the window, but the feeling of dread still accompanied me. The recordings from the previous night wouldn't leave my mind. The hooded man. I wasn't alone. My heart raced as I watched the footage again, each second feeling like an eternity. A chill ran down my spine as I saw his silhouette approaching the house. He seemed so close, so real. What did he want? I thought, trying to rationalize the situation. What have I gotten myself into? I murmured to myself, attempting to make sense of it all. The coffee I prepared barely went down my throat. My gaze fixed on the computer screen absorbed me, as if the answer to all my problems lay there. But it didn't. As an automatic gesture, I grabbed the shotgun my grandfather had left behind and examined it. I'm going to need this, I thought, adrenaline starting to pump through me. As night approached, a whirlwind of emotions enveloped me. The tension was palpable. I positioned myself near the door, the shotgun loaded and ready. The creaking of the wood beneath my feet echoed through the silence of the house. If he comes back, I'll be ready, I whispered to myself, trying to find a bit of courage in the words. The hours dragged on, and the clock seemed to mock me. When the sky darkened, the forest around me turned into a labyrinth of shadows and mysteries. Every sound was amplified, each crack made me jump. I could hear the wind whispering through the trees, and the feeling of being watched returned with full force. Suddenly, a series of heavy footsteps echoed from outside. My heart raced, and a wave of adrenaline surged through me. It's him, I thought, as panic and determination mixed in my chest. I took a deep breath, trying to control my breathing, but it was almost impossible. The noise was getting closer, and I knew the moment of confrontation was about to arrive. I stood in silence, the shotgun firmly in my hands, and waited. Each second felt like an eternity, and the darkness enveloped me like a heavy cloak. Then, the silhouette emerged in the dim light, and my mind prepared for what was to come. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, my voice nearly failing, but the echo of the question was lost in the vastness of the forest. The door creaked open, and I hesitated for a moment, the shotgun trembling in my hands. The air was heavy, almost oppressive, and the darkness of the forest seemed to close in, as if it were alive. Then, I saw him. The hooded man was there, standing just a few steps away from me. His eyes glimmered in a disturbing way beneath the shadow of the hood, and a macabre smile formed on his face. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice low and menacing, like an echo of something I would have preferred not to hear. Time seemed to stand still. Fear paralyzed me, but a growing determination began to take over. "Who are you? What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but feeling the tremor that betrayed my state of mind. He stepped closer, slowly, as if he were savoring the terror I felt. "I'm just a resident of the forest, John. I was just playing with you." The intensity in his eyes contradicted his words. There was nothing playful in his gaze. He extended his hand, and I instinctively recoiled. "Leave me alone. I have nothing to do with you," I shouted, but he lunged forward, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. Adrenaline surged through my body. The instinct to survive took over, and in a swift movement, I raised the shotgun. The shot echoed in the stillness of the night. The man dodged, but not before I felt the satisfaction of at least having tried to defend myself. He backed away, disappearing into the shadows of the forest. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding with both terror and relief. But the feeling of victory was brief. What I had faced was not just a man, but a symbol of my own fear. The physical fight was over, but the battle within me was far from finished. I was alone in the forest, and the darkness felt thicker than ever. The days that followed that horrendous night seemed to drag on like an endless nightmare. I locked myself in the house, surrounded by the echo of my own thoughts, every shadow on the wall becoming a new reason for panic. I couldn't sleep. Insomnia had become my most constant companion, and the forest, once a refuge, now felt like a maze of terror. It was on one of those sleepless nights that I decided I could no longer live in fear. I remembered what the intruder had said and how his presence had paralyzed me. If I wanted to reclaim my life, I needed to confront what haunted me. With a surge of courage, I went to the computer and started researching. After a few hours of searching, I found an address that seemed to be his, in a nearby town. My heart raced as I realized there was a chance to confront him. The next day, nervous, I got in the car and headed to the location. My stomach was in knots, and every kilometer I drove seemed to take me closer to the truth I feared. I arrived at a small house in an isolated neighborhood. The peeling paint and foggy windows gave it an appearance of abandonment, but the feeling that something was hidden there was palpable. When the police arrived, my heart raced again. One of the officers, a sturdy man with a serious expression, looked at me and said, "You did well to call us, John. We need your help to identify him." Adrenaline surged through me. As the officers surrounded the house, I felt a mix of fear and relief. Finally, the chance to put an end to this was within my reach. One of the officers whispered, "Stay behind us." I nodded, but my impulse was to move forward. Suddenly, the door swung open, and the hooded man appeared, his eyes gleaming menacingly. "You again?" he shouted, with a maniacal laugh. The police pounced on him, and I stood frozen, watching. Finally, he was subdued and taken into custody. A wave of relief flooded my body. The forest, which had been a symbol of fear, now felt like a space of triumph. I thanked the officers, but I knew the true battle was not against him, but against my own fears. From that day forward, I could return to living peacefully in my cabin, facing not just the forest, but any shadow that tried to follow me. Story 5. The rain was coming down hard when I arrived at my parents' old house. The sound of the raindrops hitting the roof echoed like a lament, and each drop seemed to carry a piece of my childhood. Upon opening the door, the smell of mildew and aged wood enveloped me. The weak light of day barely penetrated the dusty windows, and the solitude of the place hit me hard. "It's just you and me now," I murmured to myself, trying to convince myself that everything was all right. But, in truth, my heart was pounding with overwhelming sadness. There was something sad and nostalgic about the house, as if every wall held memories I wasn't ready to confront. The storm outside seemed to reflect the internal storm I felt. I walked down the hallway, each step stirring up clouds of dust. The photographs hanging on the walls told stories I had long forgotten. I looked at an old portrait of my parents on their wedding day. They looked so happy. "What happened to you?" I asked aloud, not expecting an answer. The echo of my own voice made me feel even more alone. I continued into the living room and began exploring the dusty rooms. With every movement, I felt the presence of the past watching me, as if the house were alive. In the corner, a dusty box caught my attention. Upon opening it, an avalanche of old photos and letters burst forth, as if they wanted to tell me forgotten secrets. My heart tightened as I saw images from my childhood, moments I had lost amid the pain of loss. How could I forget this? I murmured, holding a photo of me with my dog, Max. The innocent smile stamped on my face seemed so distant now. It was then that I heard a thunderclap echo outside, and a wave of cold ran down my spine. The atmosphere seemed to change, as if a strange energy began to spread through the air. I decided it was time to return to the hallway. The storm intensified, and the lightning illuminated the house intermittently. With each flash, shadows danced on the walls. It was then that, in one of those flashes, I saw something in the hallway mirror. The reflection was not just mine, but a figure resembling me, with a look of despair that paralyzed me. My heart raced. "Who's there?" I shouted, but the only response was the echo of my own voice. The figure in the mirror seemed trapped, struggling to break free. Fear took hold of me, and I stepped back, unable to tear my eyes away from that terrifying reflection. The storm raged outside, but within me, a new terror began to form. What was that image? And what did it want from me? With each step I took through the house, a sense of oppression grew stronger. The whispers seemed to come from all sides, as if the walls were closing in on me, trying to swallow me whole. My eyes fixed on the dark hallway where the mirror was. A strange force drew me to that place. I didn't want to, but the curiosity was irresistible. "Why won't you leave me alone?" I murmured to myself, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling that enveloped me. But the whispers continued, more intense now, as if they were blending with the storm outside. "Emily. Emily." The sound of my name echoed, and my heart raced. At every moment, the idea of ignoring the mirror became harder. The figure I had seen earlier still danced in my mind, and I felt as if something was watching me, waiting for a moment of weakness to reveal itself. I decided I would confront it, but I didn't know how. That night, the rain tapped against the window, and I curled up under the covers, trying to find comfort. I closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, images of my childhood began to unfold in the darkness. I saw my mother laughing as she pushed me on the swing, my father waving as I ran through the garden. But suddenly, a shadow approached, a dark presence hovering at the edge of my dream. I felt like I was being watched, and a wave of anxiety washed over me. "Wake up, Emily," I whispered to myself, trying to dispel the fear. But it was as if the shadow grew stronger, closer. I woke with a start, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was dark, and the silence was only broken by the sound of the rain. What was that? I needed to find out. The next morning, as the sunlight filtered through the dusty windows, I decided it was time to investigate my family's history. Who were those who lived here before me? What was so dark that they needed to hide? I sat at the kitchen table, the old photo album open in front of me. The black and white images seemed to watch me. "I need to know," I murmured, feeling a growing determination. But as I explored the pages, I realized that many details were missing. It was as if my parents had built a wall around their memories, leaving only fragments for me to discover. What I didn't know was that every answer I sought could lead me to a terrifying destination, a destination that was beyond my comprehension. The air was heavy, almost electric, as I approached the mirror again. The figure that had scared me the first time seemed clearer, more present. My fingers hesitated mere millimeters from the cold surface of the glass, my breath caught in my throat. "What do you want from me?" I murmured, but the only response was the echo of my own voice. A strange energy coursed through my body, as if the mirror was connected to something beyond my understanding. The gaze of the reflected figure seemed to plead, and I wondered if, in some way, she was a part of me. That night, the storm roared outside, but I was paralyzed before the reflection. "You're trapped here, aren't you?" I said, almost in a whisper. The figure moved her lips, but no sound came out. A chill ran down my spine, and the tension in the air seemed to increase. "What do you know about us?" I asked, curiosity mixed with fear. And for a moment, I thought I could see an answer in the desperation of her eyes. The following night, a new wave of courage enveloped me. The figure in the mirror seemed to move slightly, as if she wanted to communicate. "Why are you here?" I questioned, unable to shake the feeling that there was something deeper in our connection. The reflection appeared to be dancing, almost as if it were writhing in agony. "Are you trying to tell me something?" I pleaded, my voice trembling. To my surprise, the figure shook its head in a slow, almost imperceptible motion. The desire to uncover the truth led me to explore the house in search of answers. As I searched, I found an old diary belonging to my mother and, with trembling hands, I began to leaf through it. The pages were yellowed and filled with notes that spoke of a ritual and a malevolent presence that had been trapped in the mirror. "What did you do, Mom?" I asked aloud, alone in that dark house. A sense of despair washed over me as I realized that my family, and I, were connected to something much larger and more terrifying than I could ever imagine. The air in the room was thick with tension, and I felt my heart race with each passing second. I approached the mirror, the dim light from the lamp illuminating the glass in a flickering glow. The figure was there, clearer than ever, with eyes filled with terror. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice sounding almost like a whisper in the oppressive silence of the house. The figure, as if it understood, made a subtle movement with its head, as if trying to tell me something. "Why are you trapped there?" A wave of panic surged in my chest, and the image in the mirror seemed to contort, as if struggling against some invisible force. "I don't know what happened here. I don't know what they did." The words escaped me in a mix of despair and confusion. I stepped back from the mirror, trying to organize my thoughts. The idea that my own image was there, trapped in a state of desperation, left me feeling unsettled. The diary of my mother echoed in my mind, her words about a ritual, about something evil. "What did your parents hide from me?" I murmured to myself as I paced back and forth in the hallway. With each step, the feeling that something was watching me grew stronger. The echo of whispers intensified. "Emily." A soft voice seemed to float in the air, but I couldn't identify where it was coming from. I looked at the mirror again. The figure was more agitated now, its face expressing a mixture of fear and urgency. "You're trying to warn me, aren't you?" I said, my voice now firm. "You need help." The figure nodded slowly, and a wave of empathy washed over me. "But how can I help you?" The image began to move closer to the glass, and I could see the details of its face, the anguish reflected in its expression. It was as if it were pleading for freedom. "Your parents, they tried to protect you." The voice continued to echo, now clearer. "But something went wrong." I took a deep breath, trying to piece together the puzzle. What had happened in that house? What had my parents done to protect me, and from what exactly? The mirror now seemed to pulse like a heart, the connection between us becoming more intense. The figure began to gesture frantically, its expression revealing deep desperation. "You have to know the truth. The mirror is the key." The words resonated in my mind, and I realized that the only way to understand all of this was to delve deeper into my family's story. I needed to find answers, even if it meant confronting whatever was hidden. "I will uncover the truth," I promised, looking into the eyes of the figure. "If you are here, then I can also face whatever happened." The reflection seemed calmer now, as if, somehow, it had found hope in my words. The connection between us was palpable, and I knew I needed to act quickly before it was too late. The storm outside roared fiercely, each thunderclap echoing as a warning. I approached the mirror, my heart racing, and shouted, "What do you want from me? Why are you here?" The figure in the glass seemed to hesitate, its anguished gaze reflecting a pain I couldn't understand. It was as if it wanted to communicate, but the words wouldn't form. "Please, tell me," I implored, feeling a mix of fear and determination. The reflection made a subtle movement, as if trying to draw closer, but there was an invisible barrier between us. I could feel the energy pulsing, a connection I didn't fully comprehend, but that drew me in more and more. The figure's eyes filled with tears, and suddenly, a wave of emotions washed over me. It was sadness, despair, and guilt that I had never known I carried. "You are a part of me, aren't you?" I whispered, the truth beginning to reveal itself. The figure nodded slowly, a gesture so simple yet laden with meaning. It was as if it were telling me that there was a part of me that had been corrupted, a part one had buried under the pain of loss and fear. My parents, they tried to protect me. The revelation struck me like lightning. I had spent so much time searching for answers about what had happened to them, but now I realized that the true mystery was within me. "You are trapped here because I couldn't leave the past behind." The figure in the mirror seemed more restless now, as if struggling against invisible chains. "I need to free you," I said, my voice coming out stronger. The fear was still present, but there was a new determination growing within me. I couldn't keep living with this weight. The ritual my mother mentioned in her journal, maybe it was the answer. I needed to break the curse that bound me and this part of me. "I will do this," I declared. "I don't know how, but I will find a way." Tears streamed down my face, but now they were of hope. The figure seemed to listen, its gaze now filled with expectation. Whatever was waiting for me on the other side of the mirror, I was ready to face it. With trembling hands, I began to organize the items I had found in my mother's journal. The atmosphere in the house was heavy, and the figure in the mirror pulsed with an energy I could barely comprehend. Every time I looked at my reflection, I felt my heart race. The terrified expression of my image in the glass seemed to echo my own fears, and the sensation that something was about to happen left me on high alert. "Are you ready for this, Emily?" I murmured to myself, trying to find courage in the darkness surrounding me. The house creaked, and the wind outside howled as if warning about the storm approaching. The figure in the mirror writhed, its eyes reflecting a despair I knew all too well. "I need to do this," I thought, feeling that the only way out was to confront what I feared. I began to arrange the items around me, candles, a bit of salt, and some sprigs of rosemary. As I lit the candles, the flickering light illuminated the room and danced on the walls, creating shadows that seemed to move as if they were living entities. Come, I whispered, trying to invoke a force to help me. The figure in the mirror stirred even more, as if trapped in a burning desire for freedom. "I know you're there," I shouted, staring into the reflection that seemed to scream back. "What do you want from me?" The figure shook its head, its expression distorted in a mix of pain and pleading. "You need to understand, Emily," it seemed to say without words, only with its eyes. "I am you, and you are me." The connection became clearer with each passing second, and I realized that the true battle was not against what was in the mirror, but within myself. With a scream of determination, I summoned all my strength. I am no longer afraid. I will not be defined by my mistakes. The house trembled as if it were alive, and the figure let out a silent scream, while the shadows around me began to dissipate. I could feel a light forming around me, and a wave of heat coursed through my skin. "Set yourself free!" I shouted. With a swift motion, I grabbed a heavy object and, in an act of faith and desperation, shattered the mirror. The glass splintered into 1,000 pieces, and a wave of energy surged through the room. In the midst of the confusion, I saw an intense light emerge from the fragments, and the figure finally dissolved, as if merging with the light itself. "Emily!" A soft, familiar voice called me, and my heart raced. It was my parents, their radiant smiles illuminating the surroundings. "Everything is all right now, my daughter." They reached out their hands, and without hesitation, I went to them. The house calmed down, and the weight I had carried for so long began to dissipate. "You were here all along?" I asked, tears of relief streaming down my face. "Yes, we have always been here," they said in unison, as they guided me towards the light. The feeling of peace was overwhelming, and in that moment, I knew I was finally free, ready to leave the past behind and start anew.